Today, we're going inside a world where material science, precision engineering, and classical art all converge. We're going to explore the incredibly meticulous process of creating hyper-realistic humanoids. These are creations that are really pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible in manufacturing. So let's dive in and see how this remarkable fusion is actually achieved. This right here is the central question. It's the one that drives this entire industry. It's a pursuit that doesn't just challenge our technology, but our very perception of reality. It forces us to ask, what does lifelike even mean? This is the incredibly ambitious goal that every artist and engineer in this field is chasing. So before we can even begin to build, we have to understand a fundamental psychological barrier, the uncanny valley. It's a fascinating concept. See, as an object gets more human-like, our affinity for it goes up, but only to a certain point. If it gets too close to looking real, but isn't quite perfect, it triggers this deep sense of unease. Some psychologists think it might be an old evolutionary trait to help us avoid disease. So crossing this valley from almost human to convincingly human, that's the ultimate objective here. So how does this journey begin? Well, it doesn't start with a machine or a fancy line of code. It starts with a deep, fundamental understanding of the human form. It all starts with artistry. The process really uses a kind of hybrid workflow. On one hand, you've got master sculptors using classical techniques, shaping clay with this intimate knowledge of human anatomy. But on the other hand, you have state-of-the-art 3D photogrammetry. That's a process where hundreds of photos are used to build a minutely detailed digital model from a real human subject, capturing every last pore and wrinkle. This digital data allows for tiny micro-adjustments and ultimately creates the flawless master molds. It's really where ancient craft meets modern precision. Okay, so let's move to the next stage. This is where that initial artwork gets translated into a form that can be reproduced. We're entering the industrial phase now, where science and incredibly exacting standards take over. The material itself is absolutely critical, and I have to stress, this is not your common everyday silicone. This is medical-grade liquid silicone rubber. We're talking about the same class of material that's used for critical healthcare applications, things like cochlear implants and pacemakers. It's biocompatible, it's stable across extreme temperatures, and it can be fully sterilized. The standards are just incredibly high because the material has to be flawless, and the chemistry behind it, well, it's pretty unforgiving. Even a tiny contaminant on a mold can ruin the entire piece. Preparing this silicone is a very delicate chemical process. It starts with two-part compounds that are measured with gram-level accuracy. Then, to get those realistic skin tones, multiple pigments are infused. And we're not just talking one flesh color, but reds, blues, and yellows to mimic the subtle translucency of real skin. And finally, the mixture is put inside a vacuum chamber to degas, which pulls out any tiny air bubbles that could cause defects later. At this stage, you get one shot to get it right. Now, underneath that lifelike skin lies a marvel of mechanical engineering. The form needs structure, it needs durability, and it needs the ability to hold a pose. This is where the articulation system comes into play. This is the skeleton. It's a framework made of stainless steel or an aluminum alloy. It has ball and socket joints at every major point of articulation. The shoulders, elbows, hips, knees, you name it. This whole system has to be carefully positioned and suspended inside the master mold before the silicone gets poured. We're talking about precision here, because even a millimeter of misalignment would ruin the final product's proportions and its movement. Once the silicone has cured around the skeleton, the part is removed from the mold. But it's not perfect yet. There's always a faint seam line where the two halves of the mold met. And this is where skilled artisans take over, using precision tools and ultrafine sandpaper to meticulously blend that seam until it's completely invisible. It's incredibly labor-intensive work. It can take hours just to perfect a single limb. So, with the form now seamless, the next stage is purely artistic. This is where a blank canvas of silicone gets transformed into skin that looks and feels alive, all through layer upon layer of hand-painted detail. This is where the micro detail becomes absolutely paramount. Artists will apply faint blue tones to mimic veins just below the surface. They'll hand-paint every single freckle and beauty mark. They build up color on the lips and fingernails in these translucent layers to create a natural-looking depth. And then each detail is sealed with a heat-cured coating, which makes it a permanent part of the silicone itself. An artist in the field revealed the secret to this, saying the key is to use the most amount of color and the least amount of medium. So what does that mean? Well, To avoid a thick, artificial, painted-on look, the goal is to use highly concentrated pigments with just a tiny bit of the silicone medium. This technique makes the color look like it's within the skin rather than just sitting on top of it. It preserves that critical translucency. All right, now we come to the final, and I mean make or break elements. These are the details that are the difference between an impressive mannequin and a figure that truly seems to hold a spark of life. The eyes. The eyes are paramount. These are not simple plastic beads, they're high-grade acrylic or even glass, often with hand-painted irises that have multiple colors, subtle little veins in the whites, and a gloss coating to simulate moisture. But the real art is in the installation. The depth and the angle have to be absolutely perfect to create a gaze that seems focused and soulful, not vacant. And then there's the hair. To create a realistic head of hair, there are absolutely no shortcuts. Technicians use a specialized needle to implant, get this, up to 100,000 individual strands of hair into the silicone scalp, one by one. This process, which can take weeks for just a single head, has to follow the patterns of natural hair growth to create a flawless, believable hairline. The final step before anything is considered complete is a quality control inspection of uncompromising rigor. Specialists examine every single square inch under bright light and magnification. They're checking for pigment inconsistencies, stray dust particles, or even the slightest trace of a seam line. Only a product that is deemed absolutely perfect is allowed to proceed. So the craft we've just explored has led to the near perfection of the physical form. But what happens when that form is no longer static? Well, the next frontier is all about animating it from within by integrating artificial intelligence. As you can probably guess, this leap in technology comes with a pretty significant price tag. The next generation models, the ones that incorporate an AI-driven robotic head, are starting to enter the market at around $15,000. And that really signals a major shift from a piece of art to a piece of interactive technology. So what can this AI do? Well, its capabilities are really designed to create the illusion of companionship. This integrated artificial intelligence can hold conversations, it can remember personal details that are shared with it, and it can adapt its personality over time based on those interactions. The goal here is to give the creation not just a body, but a mind. And this brings us right back to our initial question, but now with a whole new layer of complexity. As this mastery of the physical form begins to merge with increasingly sophisticated artificial intelligence, the lines really start to blur. It forces us to consider not just how we replicate a human, but what it means when that replication begins to interact with us, learn from us, and maybe one day accompany us.